On the afternoon of Queen Camilla's 79th birthday, on July the 17th, every camera, every royal correspondent, and every front-page lens was trained precisely on Highgrove. The sun was warm across the Gloucestershire estate as family members gathered in the manicured gardens for what was supposed to be a quiet, carefully managed summer celebration. To the public watching through news flashes and telephoto lenses, it was a picture of institutional harmony, a monarch standing alongside his wife, surrounded by the next generations of the House of Windsor. But while the press corps focused entirely on the woman of the hour, almost nobody noticed the 11-year-old girl standing slightly apart near the stone garden steps. Princess Charlotte stood quietly, holding something small tightly in both hands. It was a modest posy of pale blue flowers, wrapped with a simple ribbon, held with the delicate caution of a child who has been taught that what she carries matters. They were forget-me-nots, Diana's flower. And when Charlotte stepped forward, moving away from the birthday tables and toward the secluded edge of the garden, the atmosphere shifted in a way that no event planner or palace public relations officer could have ever scripted. She did not place the flowers near the gifts or present them to the Queen Consort. Instead, she walked deliberately to the base of the memorial roses that her father keeps at Highgrove, bowed her head for a fleeting moment, and gently set the pale blue stems into the earth. In that single, unscripted instant, an 11-year-old child quietly altered the emotional climate of a family that has spent 3 decades struggling with its own history. What appeared to be a simple, polite gesture was in truth something far heavier. It was a moment where the past and the present collided without conflict, reopening the oldest, most sensitive wound in the modern House of Windsor, yet handling it with a grace that the adults in the room had rarely managed in public. To understand why a simple posy of blue flowers could cause an entire garden full of royal adults to fall silent, one has to look far beyond the surface of a family birthday. This was not a stunt staged for television cameras, nor was it a calculated political statement. It was the moment the public caught its first genuine glimpse of who the next generation of this monarchy is quietly choosing to become. For 9 years, the world has focused its attention on Prince George as the future king, treating his younger sister as a charming supporting figure, the girl who curtsies impeccably, manages her younger brother at public pageants, and waves warmly to the crowds. But that reading was a complete miscalculation. What happened at Highgrove suggests that the child everyone overlooked may well be the one who ends up carrying the most complex emotional inheritance in the entire family. The living memory of a grandmother she never met, honored in the presence of the woman whose name was once set against Diana's in the fierce battle for public affection. The stakes of that quiet afternoon reach past one summer afternoon at Highgrove. They touch the core of how the royal family holds its own private grief while operating in the public eye. Princess Charlotte Elizabeth Diana was born on May the 2nd, 2015, when her birth was officially announced outside St. Mary's Hospital. Her third name was not chosen as a fleeting tribute or a convenient public relations gesture. It was a deliberate, deeply personal decision made by Prince William, who wanted his mother's name woven permanently into his daughter's identity from the very first day of her life. For years, that detail remained a simple line in royal biographies noted, respected, and then largely forgotten amidst the daily rush of official engagements. But moments like the one at Highgrove make that naming feel profoundly deliberate once again. Charlotte has grown up almost entirely under the gaze of the international media, yet she remains, by design, the least understood of the 3 Wales children. Prince George carries the visible, structured weight of direct succession, constantly prepared for the crown he will one day wear. Prince Louis brings the expressive, unfiltered energy that brightens every public balcony appearance. But Charlotte carries something far harder to name. For years, the palace was content to let her rest in a soft-focused background, the well-behaved royal daughter who follows protocol and keeps the family picture perfect. Yet, behind that polished composure was a child observing everything around her far more closely than anyone realized. Highgrove itself plays a vital role in this story. It is King Charles's private sanctuary, the historic estate where he spent over 4 decades building gardens by hand, planting trees, and creating spaces of quiet reflection. Within those grounds sits a small private memorial planting a sanctuary that the King and Prince William have intentionally kept away from public spectacles and media tours. It is a space dedicated to memory, surrounded by heavy green foliage and quiet pathways. And forget-me-nots have always held a sacred, specific place within the grief of the Spencer and Windsor families. They were Princess Diana's absolute favorite flower. They were the blooms selected to fill the sunken garden at Kensington Palace when a permanent statue was unveiled for what would have been her 60th year. They appeared discreetly in wedding arrangements and family anniversaries. To place forget-me-nots anywhere within a royal setting is never a neutral act. Anyone old enough to remember August 1997 understands the signal immediately, even when the child carrying them is simply following her heart. To appreciate why Charlotte's action resonated so deeply, it helps to understand how easily she has been underestimated by royal watchers over the years, since her very first public appearances. Press coverage surrounding the young princess has followed a comfortable, repetitive narrative. Commentators focused on her classic dresses, her poised manners, her sharp glances to ensure Prince Louis was behaving during national broadcasts, and her flawless curtsies to foreign dignitaries. Between 2015 and 2026, she stood on the world stage at historic coronations, jubilees, and state funerals. Yet, the public commentary rarely probed beneath her perfect execution of royal etiquette. She was viewed as the ideal royal child one who performs her duty effortlessly and then retreats quietly into the background. That polished surface is precisely what allowed Charlotte to observe and absorb the family's history without being burdened by public expectations. What the public did not see was the private, deliberate work taking place behind the scenes at Adelaide Cottage and Kensington Palace. Those who follow the Wales family closely know that Prince William has been remarkably intentional about how his children come to know their late grandmother. He does not treat Diana as a mythic, tragic figure from history books, nor does he surround her memory with heavy, overwhelming sadness. Instead, he has woven her presence into their daily lives in ordinary, warm ways, talking about her sense of humor, playing her favorite music, and pointing out the flowers she loved in the garden. Among royal biographers, it has long been noted that of the 3 children, Charlotte resembles Diana the most not merely in her facial features or subtle expressions, but in her temperament and her instinct for reading the room. She possesses that same quiet awareness, an intuitive sense of when to step forward and when to offer comfort. If William's quiet goal has been to teach his children that grief can be carried lightly, warmly, and with dignity rather than bitter sorrow, then the moment at Highgrove was not a random occurrence. It was the natural culmination of a lesson that had been quietly taught for years behind closed doors. And then, standing at the center of the birthday gathering, was Queen Camilla. For nearly 30 years, the global media constructed a rigid, unyielding narrative surrounding Camilla and Diana. It was a narrative of stark opposites, a public drama where the world was constantly asked to take sides, measure loyalties, and assign blame. Yet, over the past 2 decades, Camilla worked patiently, consistently, and without public complaint to serve the crown, carving out a space of dignity and earned respect. Biographers have noted that Camilla long ago made peace with the reality that her public life would always exist in the long, inescapable shadow of a ghost. She understood that Diana's memory was permanent, woven directly into the fabric of the nation and the hearts of the royal family. That complex, delicate history was the backdrop against which an 11-year-old girl set down a small cluster of pale blue flowers. What made the moment truly extraordinary was that it was entirely unscripted. According to reports, the gathering at Highgrove was meant to be a strictly private family event, a small lunch held away from formal photographers and official press pools. The images that eventually reached the public were captured from a long distance, far beyond the garden boundary walls. Princess Charlotte was not performing for a crowd, nor was she posing for an official portrait. As far as she knew, no cameras were watching. It was an act done in total privacy, driven purely by personal conviction. Sources close to the household revealed that Charlotte had specifically asked her father if she could bring the flowers to Highgrove that morning. The choice of forget-me-nots was her own idea, an 11-year-old child making the connection between the grandmother whose middle name she carries and the flower that represented her life. It was not the calculated move of an advisor or a public relations strategist. It was the pure, unfiltered instinct of a child who has been listening, learning, and paying far closer attention to her family's history than anyone realized. The true significance of the afternoon lay in the timing and the execution. Charlotte chose to honor Diana on Camilla's 79th birthday. Yet she did it in a way that caused no offense, created no drama, and disrupted no celebrations. It was handled with an intuitive maturity that left onlookers profoundly moved. Reports from palace insiders noted that Queen Camilla's reaction was remarkably gracious. The queen consort understood instantly what the young princess was doing, recognized the sincerity behind the act, and welcomed it without a moment of hesitation or discomfort. If those accounts hold true, then an 11-year-old girl accomplished something that the adults in the royal family had struggled to achieve for nearly 30 years. She held the memory of Diana and the presence of Camilla in the exact same space, at the exact same time, without forcing anyone to choose between them. She honored both women with a single, gentle boundary, restoring a sense of balance to a room filled with complex history. To feel the true emotional weight of that afternoon, one must picture the two figures standing on either side of those flowers. On one side was a woman turning 79 who spent decades navigating intense public scrutiny, quietly enduring judgment while building a life of dedicated service alongside the king. On the other side was an 11-year-old child who never heard Diana's voice or felt her embrace, knowing her grandmother only through old photographs, bedtime stories, and the quiet reverence with which her father speaks her name. Between them lay a modest bundle of forget-me-nots placed beside a bed of roses. There was a quiet vulnerability in how Camilla received that moment. She was under no obligation to react with warmth toward a gesture that subtly pointed to the very comparison she had spent decades trying to quiet. She could have looked away, redirected the attention, or allowed the moment to pass in awkward silence. Instead, by all accounts, she met the child with total empathy and understanding. She recognized that Charlotte was not reopening an old rivalry, but simply loving her grandmother in the space she had been given. Standing a few feet away, Prince William watched his daughter step back from the memorial roses. He did not rush forward to intervene, nor did he attempt to redirect Charlotte's attention back to the birthday festivities. He simply stood by, allowing his mother's name and favorite flower to sit quietly in his father's garden on the birthday of the woman who came after. That was the subtle power of the moment, not a scene of confrontation or hidden tension, but a moment of quiet, unspoken resolution that no scriptwriter could have crafted. The person who finally bridged the distance between the past and the present was the child the world had spent 11 years treating as a quiet observer. What happened at Highgrove revealed that the true emotional center of the modern monarchy may be shifting to a place few were watching. Princess Charlotte is still a schoolgirl, years away from full-time official duties, and it would be wrong to burden an 11-year-old with more symbolic weight than any child should carry. Yet, the emotional intelligence she displayed the natural capacity to hold love and respect for two very different women without conflict is precisely the quality that has eluded the institution for a generation. It suggests that the healing the adults could never fully complete under the glare of public cameras may ultimately be brought to fulfillment by the children who inherited the history without inheriting the bitterness. A grandmother's legacy, a grandmother's favorite flower, and a summer birthday at Highgrove will now be remembered for a quiet moment of grace that was never meant to be seen. As the sun began to set over the Gloucestershire countryside, and the family gathered inside for the remainder of the evening, the pale blue forget-me-nots remained at the base of the rose bushes, catching the late afternoon light. They stood as a quiet testament to a promise kept across generations. Princess Charlotte did not simply carry a bouquet to a garden that afternoon. She carried a legacy forward into the light. She demonstrated that honoring the past does not mean diminishing the present, and that true dignity often speaks in the quietest possible voice. In the years ahead, as Prince George moves closer to his constitutional destiny and Prince Louis carves out his own path, the world will undoubtedly watch Princess Charlotte with new eyes. No longer just the polite young princess waving from palace balconies, she has shown herself to be a child of remarkable depth, carrying her family's name, history, and heart into a new era. And somewhere within that simple reality lies the quiet comfort of how loss is transformed into love, not through monuments, speeches, or grand public statements, but through the gentle hands of a child who remembered,